Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. Zelenskyy is in desperate. He's not just in desperate, he's in furious despair. Yesterday he had a meeting with his inner circle where he was talking a lot about the situation on the ground, about the situation with the city of Kupyansk, with the city of Pokrovsk, with missiles, with drones. He covered most of the questions. And you know that he said a lot of things, and telling the truth, I was very surprised with what he was talking about. When summarizing everything what he was talking about, we can make the next statements. According to Zelenskyy, the situation in Pokrovsk is fully under control. The Russians aren't getting anywhere. Obviously, this is not something that correlates with the reality. Putin really wants to visit Pokrovsk, but he would be killed if he did. I have never heard that Putin said something like this. Russia has lost the battle for Kupyansk. This is the most interesting statement to me, because when talking about the situation on the ground, obviously the situation is completely different. Maybe he was planning to say, or he wanted to say, that Ukraine has lost the battle for Kupyansk. Anyway, Ukraine intelligence destroyed an Oreshnik in the summer of 2023 at the Kapustin Yar rocket launch complex. This is probably the biggest statement of Zelenskyy, and telling the truth, I'm not even sure whether he understands or was understood what he was talking about. Russia is running out of resources to produce missiles, bombs and drones. We are reaching previously unseen levels of opium. It's bad. So these are the statements of Zelenskyy. Of course, it's up to you to believe him or not to believe him, to follow the situation on the ground or to believe Zelenskyy. But the situation we see is desperate for him. Furthermore, during the previous night, Zelenskyy launched massive drone attack across the Russian Federation, and the sources reported that Ukrainians used around 700 drones. Obviously, this is a very big number. And telling the truth, this is the biggest number of drones launched by Ukraine at the same time. But telling the truth, I believe that Zelenskyy launched everything he had and everything he managed to accumulate, probably for the previous months or for the previous several weeks or something like this. The sources are saying that Zelenskyy was attacking the city of Moscow, the capital of the Russian Federation, and he managed to damage some energy facilities across Moscow. And as a result of that attack, some micro-districts were without electricity and energy supply. The Russians attacked strike back immediately. Russians launched their own massive drone attack across Ukraine. They didn't use hundreds of drones or thousands of missiles. The Russians used just around 100 plus minus drones across Ukraine. Several explosions were recorded around the city of Kiev, some of them recorded along the border between Russia and Ukraine, and lots of strikes and explosions were recorded in the area of the city of Pokrovsk. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and let's discuss another desperate attack that was carried out by Ukrainians. Obviously, I believe that you've seen this video already, so let's discuss this video in details. So this is probably the most shocking video of the previous 24 hours, and here we can see how the intelligence service of Ukraine landed special forces in the northwestern part of the city of Pokrovsk. There are around 10 plus minus soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine, special soldiers. We can see how helicopter was flying leaving this territory, and the Ukrainian sources are saying that this was one of the most powerful and one of the most experienced attack carried out by Ukrainians with the purpose to recapture the entire Pokrovsk with just 10 soldiers. And some Ukrainian sources reported that Ukrainians with 10 soldiers managed to recapture everything almost till the border of Donetsk. So lots of nonsense we heard about this attack during the previous night, but the reality and the truth is completely different. Probably 2 or 3 hours later, after the Ukrainians published this video with their attack, the Russians published their own video. And here we can see the same story. They said the beginning is the same. Ukrainians landed in this area with helicopter, the Black Hawk, and then Russians began hunting, attacking and destroying Ukrainian soldiers across the northwestern part of the city of Pokrovsk. Lots of attacks, as you can see, and we will not watch this video till the end, but the reality is that as a result of these attacks, the Russians managed to destroy the entire group of special forces of Ukraine just with drones. and they were destroyed exactly in this area, so somewhere between this dense network of the fortifications and this gas station. So according to geolocations of strikes, it seems that Ukrainians were trying to get the gas station, maybe to recapture this station. You know that currently we had lots of reports that Russians are advancing in the northwestern direction and that the clashes are already recorded on the territory of the city of the village by the name of Grishna. So now the Russians are advancing in this direction, so that is why it is very important for Ukrainians to slow down Russians in this area and not to allow them to continue advancing. So that is why we believe they landed infantry in this area just with purpose to recapture the gas station and probably to recapture this industrial zone and to hold these territories for as long as possible, for example 1, 2, 3, 5 days or a week, and this let's say control would allow Ukrainians to stop Russia's advances in the northwestern direction. But once again, these units, these soldiers haven't managed to get the gas station. They were destroyed in the fields. So that attack failed, but when talking about different comments from Ukrainian side, we see that they're saying that that was one of the most powerful and one of the most probably interesting attack carried out by Ukrainians. So this is the reality. Anyway, the situation remained tense for the armed forces of Ukraine. During the previous 12 hours, we haven't received almost anything from the city of Pokrovsk, just several attacks carried out by Russians. In this video, we can see the Mirnograd southern citadel that was attacked by FAB. So we see that the Russians are approaching this area. Soon they will start fighting clashes for this territory with the purpose to force Ukrainians to fall back. The Russians are advancing in the southern parts. We still haven't received anything about the settlement of Sukhy Yar. I would like to remind you that the units of the 25th Airborne Brigade were encircled there without any chances for evacuation, but they are still there. They're not planning to retreat, as I understand, or the Russians are not planning to give them this possibility. Anyway, we are waiting for additional updates the next 24 hours, especially from the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. But today we got a very interesting statement made by one of the Ukrainian commanders, probably who has connections with Pokrovsk, with the situation with Pokrovsk. Everything grey on deep state in Pokrovsk needs to be painted red. The Russians control 60% of the city. Ukrainians are already effectively surrounded, says Ukraine Armed Forces commander. Key points from Ukrainian military personnel in the comments to Hromadske. A high-ranking officer from Pokrovsk sector speaking on conditions of anonymity stated that Russian troops already control approximately 60% of Pokrovsk and are actively penetrating neighboring Rodinske and Mirnograd. A drone pilot who left Pokrovsk reported that Ukraine forces in the forward positions in the city are already essentially surrounded due to the constant infiltration and build-up of Russian forces. So this is the reality. Once again, we are waiting for another report of the Minister of Defense. Today they will give us additional details, and probably they will give us additional details about this landing operation carried out by Special Forces of Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Kherson direction. We haven't received almost anything from this area for a very long period of time. I would like to remind you that the latest update was that Russians crossed the river of Dnipro and captured some positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the southern part of the city of Kherson. Today the situation was clarified, and according to different mappers, the Russians continue improving their positions on this Veliki Vilkhovoy island, so the Russians continue advancing here. Furthermore, the neutral mappers are saying that Russians continue their attempts to cross the river of Dnipro and to answer the 5th Selizhye micro-district. And the sources are saying that currently everything to the south of this red line is already a gray zone. So Ukrainians are no longer able to feel themselves comfortable and safe in this area because Russians control the situation in this direction. So maybe Russians will improve their positions, and soon we will adjust the map and we will adjust this part of the city in Russian favor. At least everything tells us about this. Now let's talk about the Zaporizhia direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded. Ukrainians made several attempts to counterattacks in the area of Primorska and in the southeastern part of Stepnogorsk, and as a result of those counterattacks, Ukrainians managed to force the Russians to fall back in the southern direction. So we see that there are very heavy clashes in this area, and Ukrainians are trying to do everything they can with the purpose not to allow the Russians to capture the city of Stepnogorsk. At the same time, the Russians continue offensive operation in the Gulay-Pole direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded. This is the situation by the end of the 31st of October of 2025, and that was the first day when Ukrainian sources reported that Russians entered the settlement of Uspenovka. Based on the report published by pro-Ukrainian source, we adjusted the map. And today we got report that the Russians continue advancing and that additional, let's say, buildings and constructions were taken by Russia, and we see that the Uspenovka fortified area is getting smaller and smaller. The Russians are bombing and attacking this territory with all types of caliber they have, and we understand that it's probably 5 or 6 days remain before Ukrainians would be forced to abandon their positions in the territory of the settlement, and then Russians will be able to launch their full-scale offensive operation in the southwestern direction towards the city of Gulay-Pole. No chances most likely for Ukrainians to hold their positions in this area, and if Ukrainians lose the city of Gulay-Pole, this can lead to unpredictable consequences for the entire Zaporizhia direction. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions on the way toward the settlement of Danilovka. As you can see, some sources reported that Russians entered the eastern part of the settlement and Russians are advancing in the settlement of Gai. So these two villages are the next task and are the next target of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's move further. The second day in a row we continue receiving different updates about the settlement of Novopavlovka. I would like to remind you that yesterday several sources, pro-Russian sources, reported that as a result of clashes the Russians managed to enter the southwestern part of the settlement and to capture first streets and buildings. Today the picture was clarified by different mappers, and according to these reports the Russians improved their position significantly. They're expanding their foothold in the southwestern part of the settlement, and we see that Ukrainians can't stabilize the situation at all. So we believe that according to the previous experience it will take up to 1 or 2 weeks before Russians will capture the entire settlement and before Russians force Ukrainians to fall back from this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, nothing special was recorded. The clashes continue around the city of Liman, and the Russians continue tightening news around the pockets between Zvanovka and the settlement of Vyimka. In coming days, we are waiting for additional changes. As for the Kupyansk direction, the situation also remains tense. The Ukrainians brought additional reinforcements and reserves with the purpose to stabilize the situation. The president of Ukraine, Zelenskyy, stated that the Russians lost the battle for Kupyansk, but according to the situation on the ground, as we can see completely different picture. And that's it for the short video. Military with Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.